Hello and welcome. On this episode, we'll be tactically analysing the game between Arsenal and Manchester United in the Women's Super League. Before we get into the tactical analysis, if you enjoyed the analysis, please give the video a thumbs up. It goes a really long way with a small channel like this. And consider subscribing and sharing on social media. Okay, and with that, let's get into the analysis. So the first thing I want to mention is the red card. Of course, that affected the way that Arsenal set up with McCabe going off. They pushed Ova D Ba into a left midfield position, which was really interesting at first. It made a lot of sense considering they brought Black Stenios on at that point, so she provided a lot of thrust and obviously ended up being actually the one to score from an absolutely amazing assist from Ova D Ba. So it's really interesting seeing how the team was reshuffled. One thing to say about United versus 10 players is that they don't seem to do very well earlier during the season. They drew 2-2 against Manchester City, where even though Manchester City had gone down to 10 players, they actually scored first. So Manchester United have form when it comes to this. Anyway, with that, let's move on to how Arsenal set up. So sticking to their roots, Arsenal typically building up in their 2-3-2-3 deep and then progressing that into the midfield as well, using the movement or positioning of Walty to allow the centre-backs to split for Arsenal. This was to try and get around the 4-4-2 press of Manchester United, which is quite aggressive. As they progressed up the pitch, they were looking for Ova D Ba to drop to link play, as well as some of the other fours as well would try and float around to try and create a bit of disorganisation for Manchester United. So you'd see Heath sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right, as well as Mead obviously moving alternately to try and cover whichever gap that Heath isn't taking up. On occasion, when Heath decided to become more of a number 10, then she would have Nobbs push out into that space to fill her role, so whether that was going into right midfield or left midfield. Quickly going back to the Manchester United 4-4-2 press, trying to avoid the pressure. Sometimes Zinsberger would try and throw the ball out early, prevent Manchester United from being able to set up in their 4-4-2, and that would just allow Arsenal to be able to push up the pitch and force Manchester United into retreating. So in this occasion, we have Arsenal in that 2-3 shape. So we've got our two centre-backs as your base. Instead of the 4-4-2 that we mentioned for Manchester United, we actually have Toon dropping off to try and mark Walty. But where Manchester United have been able to, and they were quite good at this actually, being able to press and congest the space in those wide areas, where then Manchester United were able to force a pass back, then you're going to have Toon move from this position, marking Walty, to try and press the centre-back. So we can kind of see what I meant there with Manchester United trying to congest those spaces. So we see here, far side, Zalem in a position quite close to that touchline, looking to try and congest the space as soon as Arsenal pass out into those wide areas. With Arsenal's centre-backs splitting as they did, that allows the likes of the two full-backs, so McCabe and Moritz on the right-hand side, to be able to push really high up. So a lot of the time, even when Arsenal went down to 10 players, they tried to have their full-backs as high as possible, utilising the width between the centre-back and the position of Walty. Eventually, Walty did become the right centre-back, obviously due to that red card, but they tried to get those full-backs as high as possible and allow the forwards, such as in this case Mead and then Heath far side, to be able to tuck inside and occupy the full-backs of Manchester United. So as mentioned, with the forwards for Arsenal, they floated. So we see here Mead, who's really meant to be the right winger on this right-hand side, is actually left wing now, and we've got Heath as the right winger. So they did this just floating, exchanging positions, typically with, in this case, we've got Little here, but Nobbs as well. And as the ball progresses for Arsenal, what they try and do is get their fullbacks quite high, and this helps if they want to try and counter press as well, which happens in this occasion. But then it also means that on occasions the fullback can go around the outside and try and create a crossing opportunity. So as mentioned, in this occasion we see the counter pressing from McCabe specifically here, helping Arsenal to be able to box in Manchester United instead of allowing Manchester United to counter-attack, which was their main form of attack. So after successfully counter-pressing, McCabe is able to then fire the ball into the two strikers that are quite close here. So we've got both Heath and Ova D Ba, and Toon is expected to do her defensive duties as at CAM. So yes, 4-4-2 when they're able to push Arsenal back into Arsenal's half, but otherwise Toon has to drop and try and help out the rest of the centre midfield. And as mentioned with the Arsenal fullback, as the play was forced to retreat here with Ova D Ba, then you have Moritz on that far side. She's trying to provide an option for Little to be able to play the ball, and then obviously she would look to try and cross it from that right hand side. And just notice as well Nobbs' position, she was trying to be quite aggressive in her positioning, trying to get involved in attack. Took 1 or 2 shots that went a little bit askew, but she was trying to get involved in the play. This kind of build up obviously went out of the window once Arsenal went down to 10 players. Instead you had Ova D Ba here dropping into that left wing position. Black Stenios pushed up into a centre forward position. She's obviously got really good pace, so that was going to be the threat, you still have Mead also as a potential counter-attacking threat. So their key form of attack was to try and utilize the pace of those quicker players. But if Arsenal were able to have sustained possession, they tried to use Marnham's ability to make midfield runs. So she would start in a deeper position, one of those centre midfielders in that 4-4-1, and she would try and make underlapping runs beyond her wide midfielders into the spaces that the fullbacks would end up vacating as they tried to pressure the Arsenal wide midfielder. And again, here we see the wide centre back, so Catley on the left hand side with BT on the right hand side, and again with Toon going back into that 4-4-1-1 or 4-4-2 where she's trying to mark and put pressure on Walty. Whilst you have the two wide centre midfielders for Arsenal dropping to try and help link play. This was something that obviously Miedema does sometimes as well, where she dropped from her centre forward position between centre midfielders and be able to try and link play there as well. Okay, so as mentioned, with Arsenal going down to 10 players, they had to move more towards counter-attacking and they looked to try and play a lot more early ball. So whether that was for Miedema when she was still the centre forward, or Blackstenius later on in the game. But without that, this was really great means of attacking for Arsenal. I think even earlier during the game, this was potentially something they could have benefited from trying to use a little bit more, just because Manchester United's press was at times making it relatively difficult for them to be able to play their style, and they benefited from being able to play those early through balls for the forwards of Arsenal. Not just the press, but also Manchester United's ability to congest those wide spaces, as I mentioned earlier. With regards to this example of the Arsenal counter, I think it's also good to note Manchester United's players who are involved in their attack prior to the Arsenal counter. So Manchester United tried to be quite dynamic in their attacks and their counter-attacks as well. So we see that here with the Toon run where she runs beyond Rousseau, the wide midfielder. But then also note here you have on a Battier, the right back, she's trying to provide support for the wide midfielder, and typically the near side of the fullback, so Battier or Blundell, are trying to support their wide midfielder as well. Similar to with Arsenal, but it was really key for Manchester United that those fullbacks got up to try and help out. Anyway, that play breaks down and Arsenal are able to counter-attack. And note here, you've got Battier who's trying to actually counter-press on this occasion. As I said, Manchester United's pressing was quite important for them, both with regards to slowing down Arsenal, but also creating those opportunities for them to be able to use the pace of, whether it was Galton, Brune, Toon, to get into goal-scoring positions. On this occasion, we've got Food as one of those three that went to go and box in Rousseau on that right-hand side. She's able to play Jordan Nobbs out in this left-hand space, and then from there they're able to play early into Miedema, who's running in behind against the comparatively slower Thorstatier, as well as also Caldwell. Yeah, as mentioned, I think these early balls by Arsenal trying to exploit the space in behind Manchester United worked really well. And you see here Miedema, even though it's 2v1, Thorstatier has maybe a 4 or 5 yard head start, and Miedema shows the desire to go and get to the ball and allow Arsenal to be able to push up the pitch. Okay, so with Manchester United, we've really talked a lot about the counter-attacks. Another thing was reducing risk. Obviously, a lot of top teams look to try and play out the back. Manchester City, Arsenal, Chelsea, but Manchester United opted to go long, mostly just reduce any risk for themselves. Obviously, going ahead as early as they did probably was a factor in why they did that too. They had a preference with these long goal kicks by Earps to try and hit Rousseau on the right-hand side. She's obviously strong aerially, so they were trying to hit her often. Other than that, Manchester United were looking to try and play these corners or set pieces towards the back post, as well as also on top of Zinsberger at times trying to crowd her out, but typically trying to hit that back post. There was obviously the goal, but then also I believe there was one really good chance for Galton too, so that was quite a fruitful area for Manchester United. The last thing to mention, just with regards to Manchester United's counter-attacks, was the combination play of the forwards for Manchester United, as well as also the wide midfielders trying to provide those very dynamic runs in the wide spaces, whilst Toon and Brune look to try and dovetail together and then look to switch it out to one of those wide midfielders in a wider space to create a crossing opportunity. With that, we've covered the key points. If you want to have a look in the description as well as the comments down below, I will post the tactical summary there. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider sharing it on social media and subscribing. And with that, we're out.